Hi, my name is Graham Brookie, and I'm the director of the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab. It is my pleasure to welcome you, virtually, to the finale of the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. For those joining the public event, the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge invites technologists to demonstrate their capabilities in real time, with the winners awarded grants to implement a tool locally to address misinformation and disinformation challenges across the region. The U.S. Paris Tech Challenge aims to advance the development of promising and innovative technologies against disinformation and propaganda across the European Economic Area, the EEA, and the United Kingdom. So today's event will feature keynote speaker Clara Tsao and a panel discussion between the judges that have been with us for the last day, judging all of the kind of projects that we've been looking at, the technologies that have been proposed. And what we're going to do is have a discussion with them, look at all of these tools, and then to conclude the challenge, the Global Engagement Center's acting coordinator, Leah Bray, will announce the awardees of the Tech Challenge. And GEC Technology Engagement Director, Patricia Watts, will briefly interview them. I'm excited to introduce my friend and keynote speaker, Clara Tsao. Clara is a national security and disinformation expert and technology entrepreneur, currently serving as the founding officer and director of Filecoin Foundation, an independent organization dedicated to supporting Filecoin, an open source, decentralized storage network designed to preserve humanity's most important information. She is also a non-resident senior fellow here at the DFR Lab with the DFR Lab's Democracy and Tech Initiative. So without much further ado, I'll pass it over to Clara and then we'll start the conversation.
Thank you so much, Graham, the Atlantic Council, State Department, U.S. Embassy Paris, NATO, CISA, DCMS, CCN, Park Advisors, and Disinfo Cloud for this incredible privilege of a keynote addressing all of you guys today. That was a mouthful. But I'm so thrilled to see the tech sector blossom into the incredible community it is today. And so I wanted to start off by sharing a little bit about my personal story and my background, and just really thrilled to see all the companies that have shown up, come here and really design solutions around some of these very pressing challenges. So I myself grew up in Silicon Valley, and I saw innovation that really served the world's 1%, and for me, for a long time, there are so many innovative things that technology can do that can serve everyone in the world. However, that is unfortunately not how venture capital and the startup ecosystem normally works. I spent a few years working in the startup and tech sector, starting at Microsoft, and I was actually the first person to take a civic leave of absence from Microsoft to serve in U.S. government through a program called the White House Presidential Innovation Fellows Program, which brings technologists into government to do a term of service. And during that time, I served as the CTO of the Countering Violent Extremism Task Force and the Foreign Influence Task Force. And I've worked very closely with many folks that might be tuning in from the GEC around how we can really design solutions that bring more companies to the table that are using, very innovative technology that today we unfortunately don't see in the public sector, we don't see in government hands. And so in 2019, I left and joined Mozilla for a year, and I also helped co-found the Trust and Safety Professional Association and the Trust and Safety Foundation. What started to happen in the last 5 or so years is companies started to hire a lot of people that had very niche skill sets, from online disinformation to OPSEC to open source researchers. And this field of trust and safety, which has been around since the early eBay days, started to further blossom. However, a lot of people working in this space still had a hard time discussing what they do around the Thanksgiving table. And so a lot of the goals of the Trust and Safety Professional Association is to really professionalize everyone that works on content moderation and all these other issues, from disinformation, misinformation, into a field where people can feel confident and people can feel like they're rising to a professional ladder. Because my big bet and my big belief is we cannot solve these hard problems without bringing the smartest people in the room to think about it. And with that, that comes with respect for the profession. Over the last year, I built the Falcon Foundation, as Graham said, really thinking about online safety challenges as we move towards a more decentralized web. Today, most of the world's internet information is dominated by major companies. And this makes it very vulnerable to countries where there might be government censorship for the government to essentially shut down the web. And so I'm working with a number of very smart people to really determine how we can store and preserve humanity's most important information. One example of this is we are uploading close to 4 petabytes of data from Holocaust survivor testimonials because we believe this information should be kept in the history of the internet forever, up to the decentralized web, and really making sure that that information has integrity and cannot be necessarily disrupted or rewritten in any other way. And that's the promise of blockchain technology. So that is my background up until today. I wanted to start with, there is no greater opportunity in my belief for innovation than here in misinformation and disinformation. We work in so many gray areas. And I wanted to talk a little bit about my reflection about my own experience working in this space. So when people talk about the best online marketing campaigns out there, I think about the tactics of ISIS, the media empire of behavioral online propaganda that had over 900 British citizens join the Islamic State and over 30,000 from the US, right? So there's so much that we work in this space that really the private sector can actually learn from. When people talk about growth hacking, which is a common term in startup communities, I think about Russian bots and their ability to quickly build communities and mass followers, sometimes even in physical protests, right? When people think about the best security practices, I think about what's happened in child exploitation, the number of child abuse reports made through the cyber tip line, through NCMEC, that would have with end-to-end encryption. When people talk about the best return on investment, I think about Dmitry, one of the 300 Macedonian teenagers who spreaded fake news, made over $600,000 in online advertising, creating clickbait since 2016 elections, and his website garnering over 40 million views, right? And so what I'm trying to emphasize here is there is so much that is so hard of problems that a lot of these bad actors online have been leading the field by, better than any kind of major brand, better than anyone else we imagine. And we need the same kind of talent. We need the same kind of innovation to fight the fight from the other side. And I want to share 3 lessons learned from my time to build a more civically responsible online culture that I hope all of you guys can take away today. Unlike the bad actors that are learning from each other, we need to collaborate. And I think this challenge, this U.S. Paris challenge, is the starting point of it. And we need to collaborate. The time is more important now than ever. Everyone in this space has the best intentions and desires to collaborate, but there are many barriers to this, from geography to funding to solutions that need to be implemented together with major technology. And so to overcome this, we must stop working against each other and learn really from each other. We're all building towards the same goal. We also need to think about investments in online disinformation, not as a cost center, but rather an ability for longer term ROI. And so this has happened in the cybersecurity space over the last decade, where today many companies are investing in cybersecurity from the forefront. They are not in disinformation and misinformation tools, and we really need to help change the narrative around this. Now is the time to bake these kind of safety measures into long-term thinking across all of your guys' fields and across startups and large companies growing in size. The third point is that there is no silver bullet, but we can design the online culture that we demand. We have all come a long way. I've known many of you guys on this call for a very, very long time. Many of you guys have been working in this space for more than a decade. And we really need to really continue to have the endurance to work harder. And as the web becomes more decentralized and it's harder for us to track certain types of malicious behavior, it will really be at the mercy of all of us together in this room to determine the culture that we want to see. And today, I hope all of you guys feel the same urgency, passion, and energy as I do, that it is not one of our only obligations, but it is all of us as a community to really build the online civic moral imperative to solve these problems together. And we cannot do this in silos. So I cannot be more thrilled to really learn more about all of your solutions, some which I've been following for a while, and also see who comes out on top. So thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Clara, especially for your remarks. The thing that stuck out to me and the thing that we're here to work on today, to make investments in today, is your point on creating long-term investment, investing in resilience, right? And investing in solutions for problems or to solve for vulnerabilities before they become problems. So now we'll be moving to a panel discussion, and panel discussion is a strong term. We'll work on disinformation, so our words matter. It's going to be more of a lightning round of remarks from our judges who have been looking at proposals over the last day for this U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. And what we're going to be talking about is current trends in the European information landscape, as well as shared threats and challenges that we work on together. So we're going to be focusing on how government and civil society can leverage strategic partnerships, which is, of course, a fancy way of saying working together, to best combat the collective threat that disinformation poses to the security and cohesion of democratic societies or free and open societies. And so one what we're going to do is we're going to turn to the judges and the panelists as we go. You'll see that we have quite a few folks here today with us. There they are all on the screen. And so what I'm going to do is, instead of introducing everybody up front, we're going to go through questions and introduce folks as we go along. So I just want to say thank you, first and foremost, to our panelists and our judges for participating, not just in this session that everybody's tuning into, but for the work over the last, 48 hours or so, as well as for your work in general as we build this field and create this shared commitment to a shared set of facts and use technologies to do so. So we're going to dive in. We're going to turn to, for the initial question, and the way that we're going to do this is I'm going to call folks out for initial questions. I don't think that we're going to go in alphabetical order or in any coherent way. So I apologize in advance for keeping everybody on their toes. The initial question will be for Dan Black. Dan joins us. He's the deputy head of NATO's Cyber Threat Analysis Branch. And here's the question. For your work at NATO's Emerging Security Challenges Division, you and your team proactively identify disinformation campaigns as well as the tactics and the techniques used by malign actors. And so how would you characterize the current disinformation threat faced by NATO allies and countries, and what trends should they be paying attention to? And I want to unpack the terms here where we talk about disinformation. Sometimes that is a tactic used in wider foreign influence campaigns. And so talking about disinformation used as a tactic specifically here. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Graham. And first, a quick thank you to the Global Engagement Center for the opportunity to participate in the challenge. Not to be too cheesy, but combating disinformation truly is a team sport, as you've alluded to. And I think no one, including NATO, can do this stuff alone. So it takes cross-cutting efforts like this to make us more resilient and secure. Now, on the topic of the threat faced by NATO, I think it's most instructive to look at this year's Brussels Summit communique, which features disinformation as a central challenge of our current threat environment. The statement reflects a recognition from across NATO's members that defending against and building resilience to disinformation is undoubtedly fundamental to NATO carrying out its core tasks of collective defense, cooperative security, and keeping our almost 1 billion citizens safe. I would also add that NATO continues to intensify its efforts to counter disinformation. So we work actively through the GEC, but also as well with the European Union, the United Nations, the G7, and civil society in this pursuit. Now, as to your question about trends, I'd highlight 3 items that I think are worth keeping top of mind here. And the first one really pins in on NATO's experience with tracking disinformation. I think there's still this tendency to see disinformation as these short and sharp efforts around elections or other events of heightened public interest, where in reality, these surge efforts occur alongside a more sustained and persistent type activity that accumulates effects every single day. And so there's no doubt in my mind, at least, that disinformation actors are aiming to be in constant contact with our publics, and that our attention and efforts shouldn't just be tied to election cycles. In looking at it from NATO's lens specifically, the sustained everyday type activity that we see tends to adapt to wherever NATO appears in the news cycle. From my perspective, the topics that tend to get the most frequent attention are often directly related to NATO's deterrence posture and its presence in Europe. So military exercises, forward deployments such as enhanced forward presence, NATO's operations and missions as examples. Stepping away from the specific NATO lens here, the second trend I'd highlight is the key role of fringe platforms and websites in the supply chain of today's disinformation. So cross-cutting efforts from the platforms, researchers, governments, things like what we're seeing here today, have driven a lot of activity towards the fringe as a means to avoid detection. And so this is a much more passive approach than we've seen in the past, and it focuses a little bit more on content placement over the active content engagement and amplification that we've seen perhaps in the earlier days of the problem set. So in this model, content is kind of placed purposely outside our immediate visibility, with the hopes that organic communities are going to bring that back in to the platforms as authentic behavior, a category of activity that's much harder to address for them. And this also ensures that the narratives are living a lot longer after their original purpose, as it's a lot harder to permanently remove the content from these less moderated corners of the internet. I've heard this paralleled to a landmine, sort of, in terms of the fact that, when it's laid, it's there, but it still has potential to do harm many years later. And then the third and final trend I draw attention to is the increasing use of cyber activity. I do work in the cyber threat analysis branch, and even as a couple of years ago, I think the cyber-enabled disinformation problem was really a rare one-off event. The big hack and leak or something like that would grab attention. But today, cyber activities are being incorporated into disinfo a lot more frequently and a lot more under the radar than they were in the past as well. And so the prominent example I'd point to here is the ghostwriter influence campaign, which was the subject to last week's declaration from the EU's High Representative for its malign activities. I think what's interesting here is the group behind it has been responsible for dozens of these cyber-enabled disinfo campaigns in the last year alone. And so I think as cyberspace and our information environment continue to converge over time, we're going to likely see more actors try their hands at combining these tools of cyber and disinformation into some sort of unified threat vector. But I think that's a good scratch at the surface. And back over to you, Graham.
Thanks so much, Dan. And all three of those trends are extraordinarily important. In particular, the kind of trend that everything old is new again and remains persistent. And so some of these things that we see that are increasing, like the cyber activity or the fact that it's not just one-off events or big events that we can kind of plan for, like elections, that remains true throughout. I'm going to turn to Flemming Splitsboll Hansen, who's a senior researcher of international security at the Danish Institute of International Studies, for a follow-up question related to that. And Flemming, can you tell us about some of the key insights and trends that you see from one very specific threat actor from your research on the evolution of Russian disinformation efforts across Europe, or Russian foreign influence efforts that include disinformation? And does the increased prevalence of digital sovereignty exacerbate these threats? And can you unpack a little bit what we mean by digital sovereignty?
Well, great. Thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to. And thank you to everyone for taking part in this. I think it's been very rewarding. And of course, I remain very optimistic when I see some of the contributions that we have been presented with. Yes, I do research on Russian disinformation, a leading actor, of course, a leading state actor, and an actor who inspires some of the other actors that we're looking at within this field. And what happens is that the thinking is very varied. It's very interesting. It's quite unique and cynical also in a way that we see Russian state actors trying to exploit some of the vulnerabilities that we have also been discussing today. And the way that I usually describe this is also a kind of technological race. So it's a race between different actors. Now, today and yesterday, we've been presented with possible technical solutions, all of which are at a very high level. And they try to address, of course, some of these challenges. At the same time, we have actors, state actors, non-state actors, trying also to exploit technology to their own advantage, trying to use technology to exploit some of the vulnerabilities that are perhaps in the human psyche, some of the things that we've also been discussing over these past few days. So when I look at the thinking as it evolves in Russia, it's very advanced and it's quite cynical, as I said. It is a race. They're putting lots of effort into this, and they're trying to rethink the way that they approach this. Also now with the use, of course, of new technology. It's also powered by artificial intelligence in the same way that many of the solutions that we've seen here are also powered by artificial intelligence. So there is a race, and we will continue to have this race. Of course, often when I do lectures on this topic, people approach me either during the Q&A and afterwards, and they say, look, when will this end? And I have to tell them, look, this will not end. This is something that we have to live with. It's something that we have to get used to. It's also something that we may not, I guess, be able to win, but we will be able to live with it. And we will be able also to deal with it in different ways. And when we look at the contributions that we've seen over the past few days, of course, we've seen examples of tools, how to identify disinformation, how to remove disinformation. Tools also we can use to educate people, media literacy, and of course also an example of how to rebuild trust in public institutions, which of course is also super interesting. Now to the question of digital sovereignty, internet sovereignty, it's very interesting, and we see, of course, now unfolding just over these past few days also a conflict between the Russian authorities on one side and some of the tech giants on the other side, specifically YouTube, Google. And the Russian authorities refer to the need to have digital sovereignty to sort of command and control their own digital space. And they do this to partly, at least, to squeeze out independent voices, and they're trying to control their own information space. And they do this with reference to digital sovereignty. We may suspect, of course, that they will also in this serve as an inspiration for other states. So we'll continue also, I'm sure, to see this race between public authorities in authoritarian states and some of the tech giants.
Thanks so much. And that's a really good point between not only the behavior online and some of the tactics that we see play out in the online information environment, but also the platforms themselves and the underlying infrastructure of our information environment. You also mentioned some solutions leading towards digital resilience. And so I'm going to point to next to Sydney Smith, who is a cultural service officer at the U.S. Embassy in London, as well as Lillian Wall-Tutso, who's the Regional Strategic Communications Coordinator for the European and Eurasia Bureau at U.S. Embassy in Paris. You both have important perspectives for how the U.S. government in particular can help counter propaganda and disinformation across Europe, leveraging a wide range of partnerships, not just the U.S. government going out and doing stuff, but working with folks out in the field at the regional, national, and local levels. So could you give us some examples of how you've been working with partners in European capitals and across the EU on this issue in particular? We'll start with Sydney and then we'll go to Lillian.
Great, thank you. I think what you said is really important, is just working with partners. You know, this is an issue that I think all governments are trying to deal with, and all of us are, I think, struggling in some ways. But in many ways, you're looking at private sector and civil society actors as really credible voices and experts in the field. And I think that was really on display in the past 2 days with the presentations that we saw. So some of the ways that we're working here in the UK is in particular a podcast on conspiracies, the sociological and psychological nature of that, how those arise and sort of how those are embedded in the culture. I think that's something that we've seen arise in the past year. And as Fleming said, it's not something that's going away. It's also not something that's new, but there is a new format for it and a new way that it that people receive it. And we've also been a captive audience, many of us, for the last year and a half, and that doesn't help at all. So we've been working with partners that already have a really strong audience, especially among young people. And we've been trying to also work on sort of creative ways to reach people who maybe wouldn't otherwise see our programming. We've also done things with sort of theater of the oppressed, getting people to use theater to explain what's going on in their areas. And that's been something that's been really interesting. I think one of the challenges looking ahead is actually how to reach older audiences. With younger people, you often have set pools, students, student organizations, but older people and older audiences are often just as, if not more vulnerable to misinformation than people who are digital natives or have otherwise spent a large portion of their life with the internet. So that's sort of our next step of how do you reach those people who are sometimes a little bit left behind, but also very susceptible.
That's a really important point in that there isn't one demographic or profile that's susceptible to mis and disinformation. One of the things that we think about consistently at the DFR Lab is we all know every single one of us has at least one person in our life that engages a little bit in misinformation, right? Everybody has a family member or a friend or something like that who, has a favorite conspiracy theory, or like has some questions about something, and creating strategies to deal with those with the people in your life who do engage in that, and not do things like make a fight out of the facts that you have at hand, or being right about all these things. How do you create engagement strategies, not just at that very personal level, but at scale across entire regions in the world? And that's extraordinarily challenging. Same question over to Lillian.
Thank you so much. Yeah, no, I love the segue, because I was just thinking as Sydney was talking about how much humility we have sometimes in trying to listen to what others think might be better ideas. And that's why I love these tech challenges, because we get to sit back and think, okay, smarter minds are thinking about these issues in different ways. And I love the nexus between the tech space and government. And I'll also add, in addition to the education partners we work with and the civil society ones, some of the best programs I've seen is where we can fund projects that work with the spectrum of ages, but especially with the youth on critical thinking skills. We did a very large project in Ukraine on media literacy and learning to discern. And I think some of those programs are some of the best money we spend, because you're starting with that, baseline of how are we critically thinking about how you get information. And then beyond those, just working with our think tank partners and with an entire spectrum in a toolbox of public diplomacy tools that we have at our disposal. So I think it's these conversations where we get to exchange that information that remind me of how rich the spectrum is of all the tools we have. Thanks.
Thanks so much. And we're going to pivot to civil society specifically, and with a focus on that network effect of who are we working with? How do we reach more people? How do we identify more partners? And so the next question is for Ashkan Gregorian, who is the executive director of the Digital Communications Network, which supports more than 7,000 professionals in countering disinformation and creating healthy and democratic or free and open information spaces, an active flow of information across the entire information environment. And so the question for Ashkan is, how is DCN building its network throughout the globe, and what are the key directions in which the organization is heading? How do you think about kind of creating more standards and more networked effect across civil society, working across all of these other entities that are part of this collective responsibility, whether that's with media outlets or with governments or with the private sector, specifically the tech platforms? How do you think about building that networked effect?
Thank you very much, Graham. And let me first thank you, Global Engagement Center and DFR Lab, for inviting us to be one of the judges for this important event. So DCN is about network, and DCN, Digital Communication Network, designs and builds its community based on the hubs. And I would gladly guide you towards what are the hubs and how we are building the community, who meet and who build together the strong collaborative network of DCN. So DCN Global Hubs are incubators providing a physical and or virtual spaces to creators working on social ideas and concepts connecting to the digital revolution. Hubs can cover a region, country, subcontinent, or continent and be hosted in either American corners, which is the case in Ukraine, or other spaces that encourage synergies and collaborations. In 2021 and in 2022, DCN Global is planning to open hubs in Europe, Africa, Western Hemisphere, and Asia, in addition to the existing ones in Southeast Europe, Ukraine, as I mentioned, in 3 different cities, and Greece, the last one with support from Cisco. The goal is to encourage new and independent voices that are technologically and socially aware to generate products, services, and content. Hubs are open to DCN Global members and affiliates who seek access to information and collaboration for creative processes using digital technology for social good. They are led by local members, benefiting from training and guidance provided by DCN Global. Their configuration is reflective of DCN's goal to build coalitions of professionals in different fields and to contribute to a better information space and the social good. Hubs support the professionals who have or can develop influence in fields of activity that can benefit because of the digital revolution, from combating disinformation and extremism to fostering democracy, tolerance, and inclusivity. Hubs can also house digital campaigns and projects for other social good causes. And so these are the concepts of the hubs that Digital Communication Network builds its community. And I am just coming back from Ukraine, finalizing our first incubator session and supported by the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. So, and we have there been discussing the specific issues of Russian disinformation in Ukraine, along with our partners from Radio Liberty, and from different other actors from the States, from Europe, and the locals, along with America House Spaces and directors in various cities in Ukraine. So basically, the DCN is based upon hubs, and it is connecting professionals from all around the world who are working in the information space, in digital information space, and who are aiming to combat the disinformation and to debunk the disinformation, focused on the specific country and region relative areas. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question about narratives and kind of the vulnerability landscape, and then we're going to pivot towards some of the more cyber-focused questions. And so the question here is for Beth Lambert, who joins us as the head of countering disinformation, or counter disinformation, at the UK government's Department of Digital, Cultural, Media and Sport, DCMS, which for those of us in the US system, we generally are a little bit jealous that we don't have as cool of a government agency. Everything from, you know, the hosting the Olympics to what to do about disinformation. And the question for you is at DCMS, at Digital, Cultural, Media and Sport, which has a lead on some of these digital issues or engagement issues, leading the kind of cross-agency effort to identify and counter disinformation specifically, as well as improve public resilience to misleading narratives, including on COVID-19, which has been a huge kind of catalytic event across this entire space, across especially this vulnerability landscape. What interventions have you found are the most effective in tackling this kind of mis and disinformation about that topic, or just in general?
Thanks, Graham. And yeah, I really should have on my business cards that I do work at the Department for Fun, really. That's what we're nicknamed as across government. And it's been fantastic being here these past couple of days. I mean, we've heard from the finalists, and they're really fantastic ideas on how we can have a different number of interventions at our disposal to address this issue. But as you said, and it's been discussed, it's so cross-cutting and complex, and the scale, I think, can be quite daunting. So it's really important we don't just look at this through the lens of one intervention, but multiple. I mean, on the scale alone, so with the anti-vax movement, we've seen since 2019 an increase in social media account follows by nearly 20%. So it's really vital we take that cross-sector and really multifaceted approach. So I'll give a quick summary now of what we're doing in DCMS on this. So first of all, our first line of defense really is that bottom-up inoculation of the public through education. We published our online media literacy strategy in July, and we've got ongoing toolkits to really start giving the public confidence and to hone their public and their kind of critical thinking skills as that first line of defense against this issue. So that's the bottom up there, but I think we also can talk about the top down regulation. So we've got our new online safety bill coming in, which introduces duties of care for companies, including the major platforms, to deal with mis and disinformation that could cause significant physical or psychological harm to an individual. And that includes, as you've mentioned, that big public health challenge of all of the anti-vaccination content and those falsehoods we've seen spreading on COVID-19. So what this bill will do is give our regulator, Ofcom, the tools it needs to understand how effectively online harms are being addressed through the platform's own transparency reports, and then they can take action if needed. So this will be some really significant legislation here to shift that dial as well. What I'd like to focus on actually is how we can bridge to that top-down regulation and then the bottom-up education approach. And that's where I see the work of my team coming in. So on this kind of the collaboration and all the huge amount of innovation that goes on in this space. So the Counter Disinformation Unit in UK government. So we assess false narratives that are spread online and then determine the appropriate government response. So it's not about responding to every single narrative and every single piece of information online. The platforms employ thousands of moderators to identify this harmful content, but instead it's about us having that more kind of holistic whole picture of emerging narratives and threats. I mean, that said, we do act really quickly when that false content appears to start gaining traction. So in the pandemic, we've seen that's included direct rebuttals on social media, ensuring that public health campaigns are promoted through reliable sources, and then working with platforms to help them identify and take action to remove harmful content as well. So we've seen this during the misinformation around vaccines. And clearly there's more to do, and we'll still keep continuing to put pressure on platforms to ensure that their policies and enforcements are fit for purpose, including, I think, like greater use of platform design interventions, while still respecting freedom of expression. So a really important piece of work for us on that collaboration point with platforms. And outside of this, I think it's the innovation question again, which is so vital to this tech challenge and why it's been so fantastic to be here these last couple of days. It's important we've got these emerging technologies at our disposal to play a role alongside that more traditional open source monitoring, especially in response to the pandemic. And during this COVID response here, we've really seen emerging technologies help us. So on the horizon scanning of emerging narratives before they start receiving significant engagement online, through AI, we can develop a really unprecedented ability to analyze data sets in real time for those mis and disinformation signals. And then how we can use it to develop that better bird's eye view, so through aggregations to then understand that broader threats to the information environment. So in summary, I think post-pandemic, we're trying to keep building that momentum on the collaboration and innovation we've seen that's come out of responding to this public health response, so we can keep improving transparency and that data sharing between sectors as well. And I think I'd end with that takeaway point actually on how government and public sector agencies can play a really pivotal role actually as the conveners and facilitators between civil society, researchers, entrepreneurs, and then platforms as well. But the common theme that's come through is that no one sector alone can tackle this issue. So it's really important we work together to make sure we are greater than the sum of our parts.
Thank you so much. And that's an extraordinarily good point on such a comprehensive approach, right? You can't just do one thing. There's not just one piece of technology that'll solve for this enormous cross-cutting challenge or cross-agency challenge or something that's going to take us all doing something to help solve for in the long run. And so the bottom-up approach, the top-down approach, and identifying, not necessarily responding to every instance of mis or disinformation, but identifying the overall trends, doing all three of those things at once to create resilience, as opposed to having one specific solution that we hope works out across the board. I'm going to turn now to another colleague from U.S. government who has worked on some of the, similarly, on some of the largest topical issues that we've faced resilience challenges with here in the United States. And that's Robert Shaw, who is the analysis and resilience policy lead in particular for countering foreign influence at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, as we call it here in the US, at our Department of Homeland Security. And Robert has been on the front lines of helping to defend US elections in particular from foreign influence or foreign interference, and has done a very good job of creating distinctions between those two threats. With foreign state actors' efforts to interfere in European elections, what strategies and technologies should we be pulling, or what lessons learned can we pull from government, private sector, and civil society actors to help us defend, deter, and raise the costs of efforts by foreign actors explicitly, but as well as by some amount of domestic actors for which there is some amount of narrative overlap? And Robert might have just dropped. If he doesn't come onto this one, we'll come back to him. I just saw his face, but I think that he disappeared for a moment. I hope that that wasn't an instance of foreign interference. Of course, that's a joke. This is how rumors get started. Robert, we just posed the question to you. But I can come back to you if useful.
Yeah, I got booted out. I just got back in, so I missed the question, unfortunately.
Got it. We'll go straight back through it. The basic question is, you've worked specifically on the front lines here in the US on a bunch of this threat activity, and especially around foreign influence in US elections and the kind of overlap of narratives that we see from foreign actors crossing into domestic audiences. And so knowing that the point of this is creating tools to work together or creating partnerships to work together, what strategies and technologies can we think through? What best practices can we think through across government, private sector, civil society actors to help not only defend against, but deter and raise the costs over the long term for things like foreign influence that employs disinformation?
Well, I think to answer the second part first, over the long term, our best weapon is investing in those 50-year solutions, right? The ones that we keep saying, oh, well, it may not help with this election, but next election, the election after. So that's the societal resilience stuff, the media literacy, the civic engagement stuff. All of that should be happening now and should be consistently invested in because we're going to reap the dividends over the long run. As working at CISA and being part of the nation's risk advisor on disinformation, we tend to encourage folks to have a robust thought process around disinformation risk. That means more than just keeping ahead of the news headlines and being aware of disinformation as a problem, but think about how disinformation affects your entity specifically, and where are you positioned to mitigate some of the consequences and vulnerabilities that you see? So that again is traditional tradecraft on risk analysis, right? Do the due diligence on understanding the threat actor environment. Are you likely to be targeted by state-sponsored actors, or are there particular ideological groups that might be interested in where you sit? On through the vulnerabilities, both the technical and the cognitive, do you sit on a particularly hot button issue? Do you rely on significant engagement on social media or through outreach through traditional media? On through your consequences, and this is where a lot of due diligence gets missed, is think about and categorize where you expect to see harms that are possibly owned or felt by you. So you can think of that as physical harms, human harms, financial harms, and especially for government organizations, reputational harms can be devastating. And when you think through both all the way through threat actor, vulnerability, and consequence, you can start to draw a through line to certain mitigation activities that might be relevant to you. And you might discover that the mitigation activities, whether that be subject treatment, fostering greater understanding about the electoral process, might not be something that you own in your house. You might not have the expertise to communicate effectively about that, but it'll help you decide who you can reach out to develop those connections and get those messages out there. If you're seeing particularly virulent state actor activity, perhaps your mission and authorities don't touch upon threat actor remediation. But if you're seeing and you're aware of those activities, you can also connect with the agencies and organizations that are better positioned and to confront bad actors. And then again, just to bring it back to societal resilience, I think all of these organizations and a broad spectrum of public and private entities have a role to play in the societal resilience and communicating the risk of disinformation and the value of media literacy and conscious use of the internet.
Thanks so much. And in the spirit of CISA's rumor control, I want to be very clear that Robert dropping was not an instance of foreign influence or interference in this case. On the question of deterrence, it's fascinating across this space, especially the foreign influence space and disinformation space, in the sense that we generally know what we can agree again on about being against, right? We generally know that we don't want a foreign actor to be interfering or influencing elections. But that also comes with the reality that we have a globalized information environment at this point, right? And so we can expect to have actors across the information environment that are doing things that might make us uncomfortable, but are the reality of the information environment. And so Robert's point on having a threshold for actually doing something about what the outcome of any specific case of disinformation is and what we should go do about that, depending on kind of how serious it is or what the intent of that narrative is an extraordinarily important point. I'll turn over to Ren Alhai, who is the public diplomacy advisor for cyber issues at the U.S. Department of State, with a similar question, which is, as collaboration between the U.S. and its European partners reaches I think a very clear pivotal point, given the scope of this conversation so far, what steps can be taken to create a more clear, transparent, and meaningful consequence for malicious actors in cyberspace? And malicious gets kind of thrown around. It's kind of a catch-all term for things that we don't like or make us uncomfortable. But what role does innovation play in also helping to build that type of deterrence?
Thanks, Graham. I think you're getting this notion of like, how do we create accountability? Deterrence requires us to require someone to think something is going to happen to them if they engage in behavior that's counter-normative or behavior that is that we've signaled is going to trigger a response. And that's a complex challenge, because I think you really need at least 3 separate things to be true in order to have accountability. One, we need to know what's going on. So technical attribution and information sharing. So it's not enough just for us to know what's going on. We need our partners, we need private sector information sharing. 2 is the decision-making processes and coordination among all of these different, the like-minded countries, other actors who want to see accountability for bad behavior. And then 3, meaningful and non-escalatory consequences. And I think we really do need innovation in each of those categories. Can we identify and share information more quickly that will help us get to certainty on who is responsible for activity that we're seeing online, whether that's disinformation, whether that's malicious cyber activity, or as others have pointed to, campaigns that include elements of both. And how can we coordinate to make decisions quickly, inherently political decisions within each of our respective political systems, the transatlantic, here in the U.S., in Europe, and with partners beyond those two geographies, about whether the facts warrant a public attribution, whether they warrant some other sort of response. And then how can we think about what responses are likely to produce the effect that we're trying to see? And I think we really do need to think innovatively in that space on, just to pull in an example from the ransomware context, not on disinformation per se, but on ransomware, people have been doing some great work thinking about the financial model that underpins this criminal ecosystem and how we might try to limit ransomware criminals' access to the crypto exchanges, to other sources of funding, to disrupt their ability to collect ransoms and disrupt, at the end of the day, their business model. And here at the State Department, we're trying to work on each of these three areas to ensure that we do have accountability, and we're doing so in dialogue with government partners in Europe and beyond. Clara started off in her keynote with the theme of needing to collaborate, and I think a key need is to ensure that we are trading best practices, trading information, and expanding the capacity of our international partners to participate in this discussion from an informed position. And that's, a big thread of our work is cyber capacity building programs that help countries think through what their own needs are, what institutions and policies they need to develop, and what makes sense in their system given their size and resources, but also the threats that they face. So we need to learn iteratively, take stock of what's working, get better every time we do this, every time there's an incident that we detect and attribute and respond to. I think we are learning and getting better. Dan mentioned the ghostwriter activity that the EU led an internationally coordinated condemnation of last week. That was complex. Like that involved a lot of different countries, that involved a lot of different activity, and ultimately, a set of statements that all came out last week. But that's the sort of thing that we're going to be up against going forward, is the need to take something like that and run it all the way through this cycle of detection, attribution, public announcement of some sort, and then a response. And so innovation is really going to be key in each of those areas.
One quick follow-up question on that, and to pull a thread from Beth's remarks as well, it seems like we have these options of, okay, do you do A, B, C option, or do you do D, all of the above? And it seems like the answer pretty consistently in this space is, well, we've got to try to do all of the above at once. But Ren, the follow-up question is, do we start with norms? Or do we start with the kind of normative, okay, here's what we're definitely against, and here's what we can be for across this entire space. Here's what we're against in the information environment. Here's what we're for in the information environment across free and open societies. Or do we have to take action against bad behavior? Like, how do we decide which one to do first? Or is the answer, well, we've got to do both at once and try to figure it out?
That's a really complicated question, and opinions are going to diverge, and so I'll only be able to give you mine, which is not necessarily the U.S. government, wide opinion. But in cyber, we have started with norms. That is the basis of what we do on the malicious cyber side of the fence. So there is a clear UN framework for responsible state behavior, and we've worked over a number of years to get even states that we disagree with on most things in this environment to consensus on how states should behave. And that includes, acknowledging that international law applies in cyberspace. That includes a set of 11 norms that have been repeatedly reaffirmed at the UN and by all 193 member states. And then that includes support for confidence building measures. This is the info sharing piece. This is other things that we can do to make sure that the risk of escalation is decreased. So, but whether that is the approach that is going to work in the information space when it comes to disinformation, I think we're still very far away on fundamental definitions. You know, when we go and talk to Russia, when we go and talk to China about state-sponsored propaganda and disinformation, are we seeing eye to eye on like what are the things that should truly be off limits? And if not, then what's our path forward? And I think we do have a path forward, you know, in the absence of clear norms in the information space, working with allies and partners to say, you know, regardless of what you see as unacceptable behavior in the information space, this is what we are drawing, you know, a line to say, this is to us, this is on the other side of the fence, this is not supposed to happen, and will trigger a response. So I think you can start to create, you know, kind of, it's certainly not international law. It's not even, you know, at the level of UN validated norms on this stuff, but it is kind of precedence and kind of customary behavior over time that gives a sense, you know, norms can be built through every time I do this thing, something happens and I don't like that thing. So I'm going to maybe dial back my use of that tactic.
That's really helpful. Thank you so much for kind of unpacking what that could look like, especially from other fields or very, very similar tangential fields, but in different cases from the mis or disinformation challenge. And I'm going to turn to, for a last question, back to the kind of innovation space. And for that, we'll turn to Tara Maria, who's the acting deputy at the Office of Science and Technology Advisor at the Department of State, the question is, making technology work for democracy is one of the kind of core pillars of the State Department's approach towards global emerging technologies. And so at the Office of the Science and Technology Advisor, you and your colleagues play a key role in bridging the interests of the U.S. government and academia and the private sector. But how have you worked or approached working with these diverse partners with diverse incentives and that aren't always singing from the same sheet of paper on elevating the importance of democratic rights and norms in a rapidly changing and highly innovative information field? Hopefully a rapidly changing and highly innovative information field because of the winner of the tech challenge that we'll announce shortly, right? Over to you, Tara.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you also to the Global Engagement Center. This has been a great program, and I look forward to seeing more of the Tech Challenge participants in this space. And I hope to share information about many of them with some of our posts abroad if they aren't already. As you said, I'm with the Office of Science and Technology Advisor to the Secretary. And what we do is work to integrate science and technology competence into policy and program development. The main question for the US with regard to emerging technology or the information field and with STEM issues broadly is how do we maximize the benefits and minimize the risks? So our approach to working with partners is shaped by two views of technology, that of promotion or promoting shared values and enhancing US competitiveness, and protection, or how we prevent critical technologies misuse and prevent illicit transfer of technology and knowledge. Values make up the foundation for this promote and protect framework. So supporting technology governance development that incorporates American values and principles internationally and with a multi-stakeholder community is a priority for us. To that end, we work to build partnerships, as my colleagues on the panel have discussed already, with like-minded countries on STEM topics that are grounded in our shared democratic principles. And we focus our combined efforts on issues like standards, values, economic opportunities, and protective measures that we can develop together. This is done bilaterally and via participation in multilateral fora, such as the OECD, G7, and the UN, to shape normative approaches and standards for the use of emerging technologies that reflect these values. We at STAS also work to build S&T capacity internally in the department, and we leverage our connections with the U.S. scientific community, for instance, to ensure department leadership has access to the people and to objective information to make decisions where science, engineering, technology, and innovation play a role. Most recently, we have added additional positions to carry out our S&T objectives abroad through a new program called Regional Technology Officers. These will be field officers on the ground that focus on transnational technology issues and promote regional cooperation specifically. They will be tracking trends in their regions and, with guidance from DC, advocate for policy coordination and public-private partnerships in key technology sectors in the various countries that they're in. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Tara. And I want to just say thank you to all of the judges and panelists, not only because we just covered an absurd amount of ground. That's unfortunately one of the things that we all have to do in this field. It's moving at an extraordinarily fast clip, and so trying to keep up with it is extremely difficult. I think the one thing that we've all basically said is that there is no easy button for countering disinformation. There's not one technical solution that will solve all of it all at once, like the Staples commercials where you push the easy button and everything's fixed right away. That doesn't exist for this issue set. And so what we're going to do here, well, first, I just want to say thank you for the time over the last day, especially in reviewing all of these applicants or contestants for the challenge, as well as sharing your insights just now for the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. What we're going to do now is turn over. I think ending on a spirit of innovation is appropriate for the video that we're about to see. We'll now share a recorded video that contains each of the 8 competitors introducing their technology and highlighting their unique innovation for trying to solve at least a part of this challenge or chip away towards more digital resilience in this space. So with that, over to the video. We'll be right back.
Hi everyone, I'm Chloe from ISD and this is Carl from Chasm, and we're both based in London. The problem we set out to solve is to expose the grab bag of techniques used to exert illicit influence online. Disinformation is a part of that, but so is false amplification, malicious automation, and the use of fake identities.
Beam, our answer, works on 2 different levels. The top is continuous monitoring. This is all about detection, throwing a perceptual net around the causes, events, communities that we care about to know when they're under informational attack. And when they are, we go to a second layer, which is all about attribution, using Beam to pull in, dive into these campaigns, pull them apart to uncover their underlying tactics, techniques, possible purposes, likely creators, and so on. It's all based on a stack of tech and machine learning, which never changes, and neither does the problem that we're trying to solve. But the underlying premise has always been to put all of this technology firmly in the employ of the linguists and thematic specialists who best understand what's being studied.
Beam is multilingual, multi-platform. We've deployed it across 4 continents. It's being used by 30 climate change organizations to fight climate disinformation before COP26. It was used by 300 civil society groups in the US around the elections. Winning this competition would let us do 3 things. First, we're worried about open communities that can't afford to defend themselves. We would build a new integration to study state-backed manipulation of Wikipedia. 2, we'd trial the application of new generation NLP called BERT. And 3, we'd deploy Beam to help identify threats in the French presidential elections 2022, focusing on disinformation targeting women and communities of color.
Hi everyone, I'm Clark and this is Rachel. We're from Moonshot, which is a social enterprise based out of London and Washington, DC, and we're here to present our disinformation inoculation game. Our game addresses several challenges faced when countering disinformation. Media literacy content on its own is not enough. We need the right people to engage with it and at the right time. Fact-checking on its own is also not enough. Disinformation moves too quickly, so we need to equip people with the ability to perform fact-checking themselves all of the time. And then the last challenge our game seeks to address is that media literacy and fact-checking are important, but they can be very dry. Why would anybody go out of their way to learn media literacy skills when they could instead read something shocking and entertaining?
And that's why we made Galifacta. It's a disinformation inoculation game, which aims to bring about attitudinal and behavioral change among people who consume information online by equipping them with media literacy skills in a context that is engaging, familiar, and entertaining. We developed this technology initially to address disinformation in Indonesia, Gallifacta translates roughly as dig for the facts. But the game can be adapted and applied to any country, region, or even type of online harm. Gallifacta has been live in Indonesia for the last 6 months as part of an initial pilot program, and we've already had some very promising results. The award funding will help us expand the game into other countries and contexts that can dramatically increase its positive impact. Thanks.
We're Matt and Charlie from London-based Extract. 20 years on from 9/11, the threat from violent extremism is showing no signs of dissipating. Propaganda, myths and disinformation play a key role in this, exacerbating societal tensions, enabling recruitment and inspiring violent acts of support. Technology has been a key factor in enabling violent extremist communications to spread with unprecedented volume, velocity and variety. At the same time, it has become harder than ever to track, map and understand these communications as they fragment into a plethora of semi-closed, encrypted social media platforms. Drawing on access to thousands of these channels and years of historical data, Extract combines the best subject matter expertise with cutting-edge AI to map, track and understand violent extremist content. This enables Extract users to identify inconsistencies in what violent extremists say and what they do, receive early warning, such as when content is shared across social media platforms, and understand how violent extremist communications online telegraph offline harms. Extract is cross-ideological, from jihadism, the Taliban and Shiite militias to the extreme right. Our reach is global, and if successful, we would use this funding to expand the set of AI models in the system and broaden our partnerships.
Hello, we are Miguel Calero from Realize and Clara Jimenez from Maldita.es, and we are happy to present to you Factalight.
In many countries, disinformation floods private encrypted messaging apps, leaving both citizens and institutions powerless to either verify nor track its impact.
We built Factalight to scale the capabilities and impact of fact checkers through augmented intelligence technologies.
Factalight allows fact checkers to automatically deliver verified information to citizens who contact them, and also recollect and analyze disinformation content in order to track campaigns, trends, and trigger alerts.
Factalight is already available for WhatsApp in Spanish-speaking countries, but can escalate to all languages and regions.
More than 30,000 users, more than 70,000 fact checks delivered automatically, almost 2 million interactions. After 15 months, we can say that Factalight is solving an actual unforeseen problem.
Factalight is using technology to help citizens, journalists, academics, institutions, and companies to make data-driven decisions. It is already in production, expanding with a validated business model, and we are the right team to scale the impact of Factalight in the fight against disinformation.
This award will enable Factalight to reach organizations globally, helping citizens, journalists, and institutions in the fight against disinformation.
Hi, I'm Claire Melford.
And I'm Danny Rogers from the Global Disinformation Index, a nonprofit based in the UK. And we're excited to show you all Veracity.ai, our tech solution for risk rating open web disinformation content at scale. The majority of online disinformation is created to make money. And we're here to disrupt the funding of disinformation by providing the ad tech industry with transparent, neutral, independent risk ratings of online content, giving them a newfound ability to steer ad dollars away from disinformation and towards quality journalism. Our large-scale data platform, Veracity.ai, when combined with our human-powered index methodology, has allowed us to crack the nut of high-quality disinformation risk ratings that scale up to the hundreds of thousands of sites that comprise the long tail of online disinformation. To date, we've partnered with over a dozen ad tech companies, cutting the number of ad auctions to the sites we track by over half and redirecting millions of dollars away from disinformation peddlers towards quality journalism. Right now, we cover 20 different media markets in 6 different languages, including English, Spanish, French, German, Italian, and Portuguese. With an award from the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge, we will be able to expand both our geographic and our language coverage with a focus on East and Southeast Asia and really put the G into GDI.
Hi, I'm Sabia from Twinkler.
we are happy to present to you our solutions to counter disinformation and propaganda. Twinkler is based in Berlin with a US subsidiary in San Francisco, California. We build the next generation technology to keep users safe and platforms healthy at scale. Our technology is based on a groundbreaking approach. We understand harmful content as data anomalies in the information environment's data stream. Our systems identify data anomalies beyond content and before they impact users. This scales across languages and protects users worldwide. We provide two solutions, the alert system Twinkler Spark and intelligence reports. Twinkler Spark sends early warnings, fully automated and in real time. Our intelligence reports provide context to better understand evolving tactics, methods, and narratives. They make complex data accessible. Twinkler solutions enable teams to faster identify disinformation by days. We help them make timely decisions, grounded on unbiased data evidence for policy enforcement or for developing reasonable countermeasures. The funding will help us find new partners to further develop our products and to protect the information environment at scale.
Hello, I am Donata from Poltex, a startup based in Lithuania. I'm very happy to present to you our solution to address one of the root causes of disinformation, the decline in trust in democratic institutions. The lack of trust in democracies is both a precondition for disinformation to spread and one of its main outcomes. We are disrupting the cycle of distrust by enabling the public sector to directly consult with the public via one-question polls, and after each, share feedback with citizens on what they'll do next or how the results affected their decisions. Our public sector clients can use Poltex to find out if and how the public opinion may have been affected by disinformation and use the feedback messages to seek factually accurate information. 63% of our users say that they trust public sector entities that consult with citizens more than those that do not. Our solution is already active in Lithuania, where we have 22 public sector clients and 45,000 users, of whom 13,000 are registered. We are looking to scale to 4 new markets and in the next 3 years, hope to become available globally. The funding from the GEC would allow us to fully automate our platform, add new functions, and translate the platform to new languages. In exchange, we provide up to 125 free licenses to public sector entities in 4 GEC partner countries. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Kalina Boncheva from the University of Sheffield, and it is my pleasure today to introduce you to the Invid We Verify open source browser plugin. It is a verification Swiss Army knife launched by AFP in 2017. It has since been used widely by journalists, fact-checkers, government organizations, human rights defenders, and media literacy scholars to track the spread of disinformation across languages, networks, and memes, and to quickly verify images, videos, and false claims. This multimodal content verification tool has been enhanced by 4 We Verify partners working closely on research, implementation, testing, and maintenance. The plugin is freely available to install from the Google Chrome store. It is used by over 50,000 users from 198 countries. You can see here most of the image processing tools available from the plugin. To help guide users, we have now added a new verification assistant. There are also advanced tools for tracking disinformation spread and impact, which include social network analysis for Twitter data. A U.S. Paris Tech award would help us develop further a new deepfake detector, enhance the social network analysis support towards new platforms such as Telegram, localize and translate the plugin interface into more languages, and implement further multilingual text analysis support. Thank you.
Thank you so much for each contestant for taking the time to present and for the work that they do every single day to combat disinformation and build a safer and more secure internet. And thank you to our partners at the State Department's Global Engagement Center for their leadership in working with partners and allies on this collective challenge. Now is the moment that we've actually been waiting for the last, 48 hours or more. and I'm pleased to pass it over to the Global Engagement Center's coordinator, Leah Bray, and the GEC Technology Engagement Director, Patricia Watts, to announce the winners of the 2021 U.S. Paris Tech Challenge.
Thanks so much, Graham. Distinguished guests, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We've come to the end of the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. I have heard it's been a very exciting and interesting 2 days, and that the diversity of solutions and innovative approaches demonstrated have been really impressive. Whoever wins, we are absolutely confident that all of the tools showcased over the past 2 days will add much value to the counter-disinformation space and to all the end users who will help to sustain the work and guide further development of those tools. As I mentioned in my opening remarks yesterday, in addition to supporting promising tools and technologies in the region, one of the key objectives of this tech challenge is to work across sectors to ensure comprehensive solutions to the challenge of propaganda and disinformation. To this end, I invite colleagues from partner governments, the private sector, civil society, the media, and any other interested stakeholders to stay in touch with us as we continue to work towards more effective partnerships to counter disinformation across the continent. I also want to reiterate my gratitude for the collaborators and all those involved in making this tech challenge a success. U.S. Embassy Paris, the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the UK Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, the Office of the Tech Ambassador of Denmark, the Digital Communication Network, and Park Advisors. So, and now for the moment you've all been waiting for. We have 3 awardees for the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. The awardees of the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge are, first, INVED We Verify. Second, the Institute of Strategic Dialogue and Chasm Technology. And third, the Global Disinformation Index. Congratulations to all of you. We look forward to working with you and we'll be in touch with you offline with more details. To our other finalists, thank you very much for your time and commitment to this cause. We look forward to other opportunities to work with all of you. And now I'd like to hand the floor to Patricia Watts, Director of Technology Engagement at the GEC, to ask a few questions of the awardees. Thank you all so very much. Patricia?
Thank you, Coordinator Bray. Congratulations. And as the Director of the Global Engagement Center's Technology Engagement Team, I am delighted to work with you to ensure innovative and comprehensive solutions to the challenge of propaganda and disinformation. The GEC has developed a dedicated effort to identify, assess, test, and implement technologies against the problem set in cooperation with foreign partners, industry, and academia. In line with this effort, each of your solutions have demonstrated the innovation and proven impact that we look for in effective counter disinformation and propaganda tools. The final summaries: INVED We Verify. INVED We Verify verification plugin provides a comprehensive open source solution to support timely and cost-effective analysis of disinformation and propaganda for journalists, academics, civil society, and other stakeholders. Led by researchers and academics, the team worked with end users to continuously improve the toolbox dependent on key needs and response to political and social events. Given the speed and the scale with which disinformation spreads compared to countermeasures, this solution's comprehensive and accessible verification toolkit can help a wide variety of stakeholders scale up their efforts. ISD and Chasm Beam Technology comprehensively approaches the disinformation problem by examining not only false information, but by placing such information in political, societal, and economic contexts. They employ their networks of regional experts and community leaders to provide coverage for underserved languages, issues, and regions. Their team can adjust the platform and data available depending on social realities. By using a system-level approach to map the highly complex networks and tools used in disinformation campaigns, this solution can limit potential harms to the most vulnerable communities. And then GDI. The Global Disinformation Index adopts a proactive approach to countering disinformation by addressing the financial motivations behind disinformation. They are armed to stem the flow of online disinformation by removing economic support and incentives for specific malign actors. Their Veracity platform can also help inform investigations into research on specific disinformation operation and networks, helping to further limit the spread of false information online. By working with private sector partners to undercut the business model powering disinformation, this solution can deter malign actors and limit their research. So with that in mind, and knowing that we will still follow up with more details about the award offline, I want to follow up with one question to all of you. InVet We Verify. How will the award help enhance the free tools and capabilities you offer? Are there any new developments in the pipeline?
Thank you, first of all, Director Watts, judges, and challenge organizers. It is a real honor to be the recipient of this award. I would like to say on behalf of the consortium that we'll use every dollar that will be given to make a better verification plugin and to help serve and provide it for free to the community of fact checkers, journalists, and civil society organizations and government organizations who are all engaged in the fight against disinformation and propaganda worldwide. With respect to how this will help improve the plugin, we have a number of ideas that will make use and progress towards. First of all, we'll work on a deepfake detection, improving that further with new AI algorithms. We'll adapt and translate the plugin to new languages and make it more accessible worldwide. We'll also work specifically on enhancing the disinformation, propaganda, and propagation analysis towards new platforms such as Telegram and CrowdTangle, Facebook, and Instagram. And finally, we do want to enhance the multilingual analysis support towards new languages such as Russian and other such languages like from Iran and Arabic countries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and we look forward to working with you. ISD and CHASM, how will this award help ISD and CHASM counter disinformation targeting high-profile political events like the 2022 French election?
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to the judges and to the GEC for their support throughout this challenge. And we're really excited to tell you what BEAM is going to be doing over the course of the next year. So this will help us fund our work in the run up to the French presidential elections 2022 in partnership with our existing and new civil society partners. We're going to be detecting and analysing information manipulation threats directed at 3 specific communities in France that are usually targets of disinformation campaigns. The first is the Muslim community in France, already targeted by disinformation and conspiracy theories at scale. The second is female Democratic candidates for public office who we've seen attacked globally in election campaigns through online harassment and defamation. And the third is work we'll do to detect any attacks leveled at the Chinese diaspora in France, especially from Chinese state information operations. We're really excited to see what we're able to do. I'm very grateful for all of your support. Thank you.
And we're excited as well. In the Global Disinformation Index, how will this award help GDI expand its efforts to counter state-sponsored disinformation in critical media markets?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you so much for the award. I'm really thrilled to accept this on behalf of the whole team at GDI. And we're honored to be part of such an extraordinary group of finalists and really look forward to supporting each other's work in the future. This pivotal investment will accelerate our scale up. It will increase our language coverage capability, especially in critical East Asian markets. It will allow us to do more human reviews in these markets and expand the narratives that we can track with our AI classifiers. It will help us move our risk assessments into video format news as well as the written word. And underpinning all of that, it will strengthen our infrastructure as we support market-wide deployment so that the ad tech space can offer advertisers the chance to choose which sites their ads support. Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you again to all of you. We're looking forward to working together. To all of you listening in, we encourage you to engage with all 8 companies featured during the Tech Challenge to determine if there are opportunities to support their counter disinformation work. Their work benefits us all in building a better information environment, so please do reach out to them or to us. With that, we have officially come to the end of the U.S. Paris Tech Challenge. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to staying in touch.